Okay, we are good to go.
Okay, ready?
Ready?
All right, well, let us start. We're a little bit late. Welcome to Coffee Talk. Today is November 14th. Open session, being recorded forever and ever, your image and voice. For those new here to Coffee Talk and a couple folks on the phone, these Coffee Talks run a little bit different than our normal select board meetings. My other colleagues aren't here. One's online, one's coming from a plane. But for the Coffee Talk, this is our opportunity to talk to you folks, for you to ask us questions. If my colleagues were sitting here beside me, we would not deliberate, we would not discuss, we would not vote. This truly is just an open forum coffee chat. Tonight, we want to focus on the articles for the town meeting that will happen in a few weeks on December 9th at, is it 7? 7 or 7:30?
We are doing it at 6:30 p.m.
Ooh,
Starting
6:30
early.
6:30 p.m. on December 9th at the
Yes.
Memorial School. We'll go through these articles. So with that horrible introduction, we will start. There are copies over there if you would like them. They are also in the mail and winging your way to your mailbox. They were mailed out today.
Yes.
Yes, cool. So you will have them well in time for our meeting. So without further ado, let us hop into Article 1, which talks about FY25 operating budget transfers.
All right. So what you have here is just a small warrant, 12 articles. The first one is one budget transfer, and this is 116,000 from the Public Safety Stabilization Fund to Police Department wages. And this is to address the agreement that was agreed to between the Berlin-Boylston Regional School Districts and the town at the June special town meeting. So basically, the way this is going to work is that funding goes to the police department in order to offset those additional funds that were funded out of free cash. And so therefore, the 116,000 in police wages that were raised through taxation will not be used and will flow to free cash, therefore offsetting the payment to the schools in free cash. Sounds a little bit confusing, but this is actually the way that the Department of Revenue has asked us to address this. So we are just making that adjustment so we can give the agreed upon funds to the schools. Any questions on that article? Online?
Nope.
Trying to keep an eye online too.
I will, I'll keep turning around.
Perfect.
The second one is for the public safety second floor renovation project. As you know, both chiefs are here. Oh, here comes Roger. Oh, okay, to follow along. All right. Both chiefs are here if you have any questions, but down the hall and over the main section of the building where police and fire sit, we are building out the bunkhouse upstairs. This will allow for better space. It will allow Eric to continue working towards accreditation for many of the requirements. It will also help with recruiting, because unfortunately, when people come in and they go downstairs and they realize that it's really not that conducive, we've been losing recruits. So, and thanks to Assabet Valley, they have pretty much come to our rescue on this, and honestly will save us gigantic amount of money for them to do it. But we need to transfer some money around to do the renovations.
Yes, so this is the balance of funding. We started transferring funds with ARPA money for the design and a little bit of seed money to start on the project. And then at town meeting, we transferred the first 175,000 from the Public Safety Stabilization Fund in May. And now we need to transfer the balance in order to pay for the project, which is 455,000. That is estimated to be a $700,000 project in total, which consists of a 15% fee to Assabet Valley Vocational Technical School for the construction work, plus the cost of building materials. I'm pleased to report we're at about 95% completion right now on the design plans. and Assabet couldn't be more ready to get started. We also have some excitement from our legislators. Congresswoman Lori Trahan is very excited about this project, and just the opportunity for the students at Assabet to work across multidisciplinary, efforts where you have plumbing, electrical, construction, all working together. This is a project that will benefit them as well as save us about 2/3 of the cost of what this project otherwise would have cost, which we would not have been able to do this project without Assabet. So it's really a win-win on both sides. So any questions there?
No, and then this one and the previous one, just want to let you know that FinCom has provided their recommendation 4-0 for that. Any questions for either chief that are here to talk about the bunkhouse and expectations? And if you do, you have to come up and speak into the mic because otherwise you can't be heard. All right. Got nothing. All right. Moving on, Article 3, talk about purchase of a police department cruiser. Eric is probably the best one to talk about. Unfortunately, the timing that it takes to get a cruiser in once it's ordered. So we're looking at moving some money around to help move that process along. Kristen?
So we have a backlog statewide, potentially further out than that, of police cruisers. Chief can give you the specifics, but we are looking at the possibility of getting a cruiser, I believe in May or August, if we order it now.
August to September.
August to September if we order it now. So typically this is the cruiser as part of our replacement schedule that we do, that we would put on the May annual town meeting, but because of the lengthy delay and backlog, it would make sense for us to get in the queue now and put this article forward since we're having the fall town meeting and not put it on May town meeting instead.
So Eric, if we waited to buy one, how much would costs increase? Right now, you're looking at 71. If we waited, how much would it go up? Ish.
Anywhere between 3% and 8%.
You're asking me to do math. So that's why we're trying to hop now and transfer the money around. Questions?
It's just informational. So transferring the money now and then you put your order in. Gotcha.
Right,
It's a good faith thing we're doing here. Gotcha.
well, it's also that the town's not allowed to even commit money unless it has the money already allocated. So it's not like as soon as we pass this, we're writing a check for
No,
the
I
dollar
got
amount,
that,
Yep.
but yeah.
FinCom has also approved this with a 4-0 vote. All right, nothing? All right, on to Article 4, revocation of dedication of revenue to opioid stabilization fund. So Kristen, I'm just gonna let you take that one.
This is really a housekeeping item. There are, as you've probably heard, a number of settlements going on nationwide. There were lawsuits against the pharmaceutical companies that made the opioid products for what they stated were deceitful advertising and marketing tactics. And so there are state-wide settlements that are involved. The town is part of that and has been receiving funding as a result. We are at this point up to just under $40,000 in funding that we have received that can go back into the community for very specific measures in order to address some of the supports and other programs that would help with the opioid crisis. However, when the settlements came forward, it came fast and furious, and the state initially said, put the money into a stabilization fund. They have since come out with recent guidance that that money should be placed in what's known as a special revenue fund instead. So what this article seeks to do is to revoke the town meeting vote that was taken back in, I believe it was May 1st of 2023. And then we would be able to put these funds into a special revenue fund at the recommendation of the Department of Revenue to be able to access those funds and start developing programming around the state regulations or guidance rather for what we can do.
Questions?
I have a question. Who would be responsible for those programs?
So those programs, we're looking at a couple different options. Neshoba Boards of Health is doing some work right now. But we think based on sort of the unique nature of Berlin, we may like to do something in-house in conjunction with police, fire, local Board of Health, and perhaps our COA director as they come on board. So it would be really nice for us to be able to design something that is very specific and helps with family supports and other education. So we're in the process of having those conversations right now.
Right, but to be clear, because at this point, we don't have a plan on how it just gets spent. It just moves it from one fund to another.
That's correct.
Would town meetings still be necessary to spend the money out of this special revenue account?
No,
Okay. So it would then fall to the select board to be able to spend those funds.
correct. So we would develop a program and bring it to the select board.
About time, 30 years.
All right. Nope. All right. Article 5 talks about amending the recreation revolving fund bylaw. What this says, there's been multiple programs that the Recreation Committee has started to assist school and programs in the summer. So what this article will do will help to move some of those funds around to be able to pay for the counselors who actually run the programs.
So it actually will amend the bylaw to allow for the wages to be an eligible use of revolving funds. The bylaw very specifically states what you can take in funds for and what you can spend funds for. So in this instance, there's been new programming that's started up through rec. And unfortunately, wages has not been part of that eligible uses in the past. So it's really, again, a housekeeping item to add wages in there. Typically, you know, it makes sense to use the funds that you bring in from programs to pay for the counselors that actually run the programs. So this will allow us to do that.
Questions? All right. Moving along to Article 6, to amend the Community Preservation Act Committee bylaw. If you look down on Section 1E, you'll notice that there is a strike through on a part of the bolded text and then the addition of a new housing trust. So, Kristen?
This one's another housekeeping one, as I would say. The Housing Partnership is a now defunct town committee, and the town meeting voted to create a municipal affordable housing trust. So that would be the appropriate party to have serve in the stead of the Housing Partnership on the Community Preservation Act Committee. They do receive, the Housing Trust does receive direct funding from Community Preservation Act funds. So having them have a seat at the table would make logical sense.
All right. Article 7, to amend the electronic voting bylaw. We've been using this since COVID, but unfortunately never had a bylaw to be able to put it in our town bylaws. I looked around online, and just a little fun fact, as of 2024, there are 49 towns that still count statewide ballots by hand, and the state of Massachusetts made up of 351 or 359 towns and cities in the Commonwealth. So we are definitely in with the new age of the electronic clicker.
Right, so this is for voting at town meeting.
That is correct.
And if people who've been to town meeting know that at the start of every town meeting, Barry starts a motion to say, is it okay to do things by electronic clickers? And we do a hand vote for that. This will put in the bylaws that it's okay to do by electronic voting, and will mean that at town meetings, we don't have to start off with that motion anymore. So it should speed up future town meetings for something that we're generally going to keep doing, because the clickers, I think, have been an incredible
Mhm.
time saver at town meeting.
They're entertaining too.
They are entertaining, easy to use.
try.
Just make sure you return them at the end of the meetings. All right.
And if you still have one of the ones that were from the last town meeting, please return them, because I
We're
think there
still,
was
what, a couple
seven,
short?
seven that were missing.
We did have to replace
Yeah,
some for a community who loaned us some of their clickers. So if you happen to come across one at home somewhere under the washing machine, maybe, please bring it back. It's not too late.
Yeah, check a spring jacket. It's probably in a pocket. All right, Article 8. Elected officials recall bylaw. This was something that the board had requested that Kristen gather some information, talk to legal about it. It's really not anything new. Again, when I did some research and it said that the right of the citizens to recall elected officials is believed to have been mentioned first in the Massachusetts Charter of 1691. So it's definitely been around for a while. It's one of those items that you don't want to use, but if you have to use, you need to make sure that it's in place.
It is, so I can walk you through it a little bit. We wanted to set the bar high enough that it couldn't be, I just don't like Joe, so I'd like to recall Joe. And 5 of my friends got together and decided to recall Joe. So basically, there's a multi-step process that involves the town clerk. And I did want to make it clear, this is just for the town of Berlin. This
Mhm.
has nothing to do with schools or anything outside of the town. The Berlin-Boylston Regional School District is not subject to the town of Berlin's bylaws. So I did get a question on that, so I wanted to put that out there. This would start by 50 registered voters initiating a recall petition by filing it with the town clerk, along with the name of the person they would like to recall. The town clerk then goes through and she certifies the names, very similar to when you're actually running for office, certifies names and addresses. And then there is a completed recall petition that requires signature by at least 10% of registered voters or 75% of the average number of voters in the town election for the previous 3 years, whichever is higher. So basically 10% of registered voters or 75% of your average voters in the last 3 elections is what that comes down to. So it sets a relatively high bar, particularly in Berlin, where we have a high number of registered voters. The town clerk then would have to certify all of those signatures. There would be an election, a recall election, as well as putting forth a name of a person to fill that seat as well. So you're doing everything at once, which is, really the way to do it if you can, because that way you're already calling a special election. You don't want to have to call it twice. And then there is a provision in here too that states that it cannot be filed against someone within 6 months after taking office. And the person who is named in the recall ejection, the recall election can also not be removed until at least 6 months after that election. So that's just kind of a very basic overview. All of the text is in here. I don't know if anyone has specific questions on it.
I think, Kristen, this was brought from another town in some respects. We
was.
borrowed heavily.
Yes, we beg, borrow, and steal in local government. It's really the opposite of what they teach you to do in school, which still kind of gets me all these years later. I actually worked on this bylaw in a former community, so I know it has passed muster. It also has been reviewed by town council, and we looked at a lot of different bylaws when we went through this process. So I feel comfortable with it.
For me, proposing this now, it was, some people ask questions about things that I've read in the news about other towns that have had recalls. I thought it was important to put this forward when there's not, sort of, as far as I know, any grumblings on town of any official being, because then you're not writing it because you want to get rid of person X or person Y. You're writing because it makes good policy for the town. And the idea that the news is out there, there have been some elected officials who have done some horrible things. And the idea in Berlin that if they chose not to resign, they could sit on their elected body for as long as their term was. And so it just seemed like that, again, when there's not someone currently, as far as I know, focus of this, it was a great time to sort of write it and get it on the books.
And it's not widely used. People are wondering, I looked up recall campaigns in Massachusetts. There is one currently in 2024 in Hopkinton. There are four in 2023, Brookfield, East Hampton, Dartmouth, Nantucket, 4 in 2022, 3 in 21, 4 in 20, 3 in 19. So it's not something that is widely used, but again, it's one of those things that if needed, we'd rather have than not have and try to scramble.
I'm just curious, is there a, do they have I'm not gonna read the whole thing, do they have a rebuttal part where the person that's we're asking to recall, do they get to state their case, or
Right, so
it's after the fact?
right, the question, because you know, the way it has to do with the person who's the subject gets a chance for rebuttal. In some respects, there's an election, it becomes a rebuttal, is that,
Mhm.
so once it gets filed, there's a town election that person and their supporters can, you know, make their arguments around town. The people who are trying to recall them can make their arguments around town, and then the majority rules at a town election.
Gotcha, gotcha.
Are there standards or parameters around the recall?
There are not standards, so the question was standards around the recall. We thought about it a little bit. It is, the funness about the English language is if you start saying this is appropriate for recall and this is not, you're getting arguments about whether it's choose it. And it's really, someone wants to, you know, recall an official because they dyed their hair and people didn't like the color they dyed. You'd kind of hope that around town that they'd have a hard time finding 50 signatures to even get the petition started. And then another hard time trying to find 300 people to sign it saying, you're right, I didn't like the color of that hair, therefore we should recall this elected official. And so it's trusting a little bit the populace to be able to go, this sounds like a real reason to recall someone, and it's not.
There are a few from Massachusetts that they talked about general reasons for recall. One is malfeasance. I had to look these up, the definitions up, which is wrongdoing by a public official. Misfeasance, which is the act of engaging in an action and failing to perform the duty correctly. And nonfeasance, which is failure to perform an act that is required by law. But again, nothing, not, you
Right.
know, to Scott's point of, I don't like what you're wearing. It's,
Right.
these are pretty general.
And even those first two, like, you know, you didn't take an action, the direction, it could be just someone voted a direction you didn't want them to vote on something. And so I think just taking out it takes part of that debate away about whether or not it fits one of those three categories or not. And then again, trusting that the populace wouldn't do it for something silly.
We have a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, go-
No, I was
I
just
asked
gonna
last time.
say, I would specifically remember another town, and I don't remember which one it was. I had somebody who was committing one of those
Bad things.
Yeah.
bad things, malfeasance or whatever, and they didn't have a mechanism to
Right.
get rid of them, and they were really stuck, and I can't remember.
Right.
And
It was not good. It was,
Yeah.
for years, it was not a good scene.
right, and several of these actually failed because the process wasn't followed. They didn't get the number of votes that they needed. They didn't get it in the time that they needed. So that's why it's just not something as get out.
Yeah, it's not.
There's an entire, right, there's an
Right.
entire process.
So,
Right.
Okay, Chris is trying to ask a question on.
We have a question from the audience?
Yes.
Christie.
Can you hear me?
Can't hear you for some reason.
Yeah.
Chris, are you on mute?
No, she
No.
doesn't look like she is.
We need a bingo card. Mute.
Everything get in the
There's
chat.
Chris.
Um,
I think this might be a,
Can you hear me now?
no.
We can even see you
can't
now,
hear you.
Chris, but we can't hear you. Yeah.
Nope, lost you that time too. All right, I think she just waved. All right,
Lisa's hand.
Chris, can you try to talk again to see if Roger was able to turn you up?
Well, hang on a minute.
no, we can't hear you. Can read your lips, but can't hear you.
That is really.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I don't know if it's something you can drop in chat.
Do we have the chat on?
Do we have chat on? We may not, I don't know.
Look,
Usually.
It does look like your microphone's off.
Oh,
Alright.
oh, does it? Okay, sorry. No, it says,
It looks like it's slashed, does it not?
That's the microphone
our-
on her laptop. Because of her laptop has the mic on, we get feedback to.
how to,
And she typed it in the chat, and then you can read it.
because of some state laws around open meeting and stuff, you can't have chat enabled because allows, I can't remember the legal stuff. I just know we had to have chat
Yeah.
disabled to
Okay.
during
Ask
public
Peg
meetings.
to read her text I just sent her.
Well, I saw
Chris,
my
if you
cell phone
send
in
it
her
to me,
hand.
I can read it.
Oh, bad.
Oh, this does this. It's
Technology.
kind of like the shrinking head.
Yeah, it's a screenshot of a screenshot of a screenshot.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, if you get it over to Kristen, she can read it to us.
Ask Peg to read her text. Oh, it came to you.
Oh, well, I could hear my,
The-
I could
the
hear my
magic.
phone going off, but I wasn't going to.
There it goes.
Yeah,
Well, because you're not supposed to use your phone during a public
Right.
meeting, so even though it goes off, I
Right.
ignore it.
Yeah.
She said I had asked to have this on, oh. Oh, all right. Well, she said she had asked to have this on an agenda before town meeting to discuss whether we wanted to go forward with it, but
But
I mean, it's.
Yeah.
The board
Well-
did sign the warrant at their last meeting though,
Yeah.
Right.
so there wasn't an opportunity to have another,
Discussion, right?
right?
we
well,
have one more board meeting before town meeting.
Sure, I mean, we
Right.
can, it can
Yep.
always
We can
be
amend it.
further
Yep.
discussed, and there is
Yep.
the option of passing over an article if the board so
And-
chooses, so we do have a meeting on December
Right.
2nd.
Right. All right, now I'll make a note to add it.
And Chris's sort of, if I remember the order of things, is that this ended up being discussed and added at a meeting that Chris couldn't make.
Correct.
And so she
Oh.
didn't get a chance to have as much input as she probably would like to have had in that.
Okay, all
Okay,
right.
so Peg, you'll add that to the agenda for the 2nd?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
yes.
you.
It's like, I think there's a hand in the audience, wasn't
Oh, another one?
it? And no,
Okay.
audience that direction.
Oh, in the room.
So I just want to confirm, there is no current mechanism for recalling a public.
Correct. In Berlin, there is no current mechanism. And so if like, I left here and cleaned out the treasurer's office with all the money, I'd be arrested and go to jail, but I could still be a select board member until I personally chose to resign. And so that would just be odd if one of your select board members was, sitting in a jail cell attending by Zoom for a period of time.
Orange
To
is
be
not
clear,
your color.
I am not planning on doing anything like that. But there is no current mechanism at all.
So does this cover that in town, like which?
Elected.
It'd be all
Elected
town
officials.
elect, so select board, planning board, town clerk,
Assessor.
board of health,
Assessor.
assessors, cemetery commission, town moderator, trustee of trusts, because that's elected, I think, right now.
That isn't elected.
Library?
Library board, yep. Basically, all town of Berlin elected officials.
That would be on your annual town meetings.
You're
You're not part of the town.
The school board is its own independent government body, and because it's its own government body, they have their own bylaws.
So there would need to be a Berlin one, a school one, and I don't know if Boylston has one. So.
But theirs would not cover the school district either.
But
Thank you.
And my last thing is just so if this does pass and does go through, that there's just, because that's a good question that Lisa just brought up, how would people even know that information, like who is elected without going to have to kind of sort through? So that that information is available to people.
sure,
Is it in the town? I want to say it's in the town report
Mhm.
somewhere.
Also, on the annual town election, that information does go into the town report every year as well. And then the clerk
Yeah.
posts that on the website.
there are a
so-
lot of volunteer positions in town that are also in that report that wouldn't be covered by this
Right.
because they're just
Right.
appointed at our pleasure or the pleasure of another body.
This would be people
Um,
that were actually elected at your annual town election.
I'll look in the town report.
Yeah,
I want to say
I-
that there's
we s-
something
we
in
split them
there.
out.
I think that once.
In the town clerk has it.
Yeah, and once it passes, assuming it passes, let's assume it passes. When we do a sort of a PR thing about it, we could give the list to the people
Mhm.
that it impacts, yeah.
Yeah, because there is a definite list of who's elected and who's appointed. And I know it exists somewhere and I've seen it, but I couldn't tell you where I've seen it. But I've got that one. We'll follow up with that. All right. All right, good behind us. All right, moving on. Article 9, to accept Mass General Law, Chapter 44 on the prudent investment rule.
Okay, so prudent investing basically allows the town to diversify its investments, similar to what other banks and entities are allowed to do. Where there is a very short list right now of investment opportunities that municipalities are allowed to invest in. It's called the Mass Legal List. It's infrequently updated, and as we know, markets shift and change all of the time. So this would actually allow the town to use an investor to look at either mutual funds, stocks, bonds, alternative investments, and make the decision as to what level of risk is appropriate for the town. There still is a limit on obviously the types of funds that can be addressed, and the select board would write a policy as well if this were to be passed at town meeting. But this would allow us basically to potentially bring in more revenue and interest on our investments, which, as we know, money is short. We'd like to bring in more wherever we can while managing the risk. So there are specific companies out there that this is what they do. One of them is Bartholomew. They're used by well over 200 municipalities in the state to manage investment funds for cities and towns. And I can tell you at this time, there are at least 75 or 80 cities and towns that have adopted Prudent, and there are many more going to town meeting this year with the Prudent investment request from town meeting.
And then I know you said it, but I want to clear again, this allows the select board to change the policy. That
Correct.
this, just by passing the town bylaw, does not automatically allow us to invest in anything different. It would still have to, we'd still work with you and the treasurer and the collector to figure out what a good policy would be that balances risk and return, because
Yes.
there is added risk to some of these, that the risk is low, but not zero.
Correct. So the town does have an investment policy
Mhm.
that we would modify in accordance with the recommendations. You know, and we'd work with obviously the select board, like you said,
Yep.
treasurer, investor.
Right.
You know, people that do this every
So
single
it's not-
day.
It's not an investment carte blanche.
No.
Mm-mm.
No,
It is, will then come up with a strategy and a list
Right.
of protocols.
and even the prudent investing law of the state is still not, even if we adopt this and the select board follows it to as far as it could go, it is still a fairly conservative investment policy, that there are not, there are not wild things out there, but it just right now, basically, it's a lot of government bonds we can do it and things that like have zero risk. And we'll be able to go- Right. We're not buying
Blue chip
Franklin
companies, not-
Hummels and
Beanie Babies.
I have
But-
several of those in my closet, just in case, if I have the one that I'm going to be very rich per Facebook.
right.
Just saying. Mhm.
And so it would allow us to figure out where that line is, but the line is like sort of zero risk right now. And do we move it to ultra low risk? Which gives a few more things, the potential you could invest like in bonds of Fortune 500 companies,
Right.
and things like that are not zero, but the odds that some of those companies are just going to disappear tomorrow is very, very, very unlikely.
Cool.
Moving
And-
on.
Sorry,
Oh, sorry.
the amount of money, I mean, the town is not rolling in tons, but the amount of money we have sitting around that could be invested is still a couple $1 million.
It's several million
Right.
because, right, we have stabilization funds, we have trust funds.
yep.
There's certainly some funding that this would impact, and that adds up quickly.
Right. And so even if we end up with like, 1/10 of 1% more, that is money. And we have a lot of small programs in this town that an extra $5,000 or $10,000 to that program makes a big difference in what can happen.
Cemetery commission. talked about this, etc.
Right, specifically, right, yeah, the cemetery commission that has trust funds that they use to maintain the cemeteries, if we can invest a little bit wider, might bring in a little bit more money that helps out the cemeteries, yes.
Mhm.
In a safe manner.
And
In a safe
yeah,
manner,
right, yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Absolutely. That's the
Right,
key.
Yep.
Right.
All right. Article 10, repurpose funding for the old fire station roof replacement. A little back history on that. About a year or so ago, maybe a wee bit more, we had an independent third-party company come in and evaluate all the town buildings and tell us what condition they were in and how much money it would cost and what was wrong to get these buildings up to speed. Some of these reports are available online. If you go to Town of Berlin, they are all out there for all our buildings, but a little bit of background on the old fire station. It sits on 0.36 acres of land, so that's not a whole lot. It was built in 67, so it's way over 50. Minimal updating has been done. Masonry walls, concrete foundation have severe cracking. It is recommended that a professional architect is needed. The infrastructure is aged and degraded. Plumbing, electrical, HVAC, fire alarms need replacement. The lighting is old. It's obsolete T12 fluorescent bulbs. Some of it's not functional. We don't have any fire suppression in it. Parking lot needs quite a bit of help. And if you were looking for costs to do fixes anywhere between our current time frame and 10-year time frame, you are looking at $1.8 million. So we are looking to potentially move some money that the town voted to fix the roof on a building that capital and the select board have decided it is really
Right.
of minimal value to the town.
So yeah, at a town meeting prior to having this facility study done, we approved some money to replace the roof. Before we got to it, we started doing the facility study and decided that it probably wasn't worth spending too much money on a building that we weren't sure what it's at. After had the facility study done, the fire building there and the rescue building
Correct.
are buildings that we don't think have a long-term use for the town. Especially when you start looking at, like, even if we had $1.8 million to fix it, we probably could do better things in this town for $1.8 million. And so
And
it's
that's only
yeah,
one building.
right. And so it is taking the money that we are set aside in some respects to fix the roof and instead use that to remove the buildings, which then also removes the liability of trying to have to both fix the buildings. But falling down buildings have liability of their own, and vacant buildings have a habit of attracting not the greatest
Mhm.
activities. Hopefully, ones close to the fire station and police station don't attract too much bad activity, but still, there's risk there. And so I think this is a prudent, both saves long-term dollars, saves some short-term dollars, reuses money we've already set aside. It was just, I think, a win all the way around.
Right. And potentially that area could also be used as another access for fire and highway, fire and police to get out onto 62. That will be a far longer project because now you're going to start dealing with the state on getting out and getting lights. So that's way, way down the road. So right now we just need to look at those two buildings and coming down and when coming down.
So one is the old fire station and what's the other building?
The rescue building,
the rescue building right
aka
next
the
to-
old Rudolph building.
Yeah, yeah. The two buildings, they're right next to each other on West Street,
Yes, and
just around the
those,
corner.
and honestly, those two buildings, it's not even acre of land. It's like 0.78 acres and it's on a really bad road.
Mm.
So it's not like you could potentially turn that into something because then there's a safety issue of trying to whiz out and whiz in from it.
Yeah, if
So,
someone wanted to turn those into retail, the amount of problems cars getting in and out would have
And
would
there's no
just be,
parking.
and there's no parking, and so we just couldn't find a use for town stuff. There's not a use on a commercial market.
Right.
Um,
and even for storage, there's too much money that would need to be involved to get those buildings up. When, as Scott was saying, that money could be used for other things in town.
Gotcha.
How'd we do on Article 10? Did we pretty much kill it
Very
for you?
nice.
All
I
right.
got nothing else to
Yeah.
say.
Well, we have a hand up.
well, I'll have to see if we can get the person to,
That's Chris.
that's Chris again, sure. She had it down for a bit, so this is up again.
Yes, I'm testing it out.
Oh,
No.
No?
Can't hear you.
no.
Well, I'm told through text.
Because
But I
she's
am-
not on mute. Her camera is working.
And we turned the I saw.
Indeed,
Deep
Yeah,
yeah,
it says
volume
camera-
on the
turn it
TV.
up.
Camera is up on the TV.
Is it one of those computer volumes that need
No,
to
because
go up?
those have to be muted. It would be
The feedback.
cable usually that would have to go up to hear it in the room. Because
Yeah.
that
Right.
comes through the speaker.
Right, it comes
Right,
to the
so
speaker, right, and it says it's up.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, here
Well.
it comes.
I can hear it on my computer.
good.
Do you want to translate?
Well,
She apparently can be heard in the AV room next door, but not into here, which means
You-
these
you-
speakers might not be
Speakers
on.
aren't Working or something, right?
Yeah, but we
so,
can hear us out of them.
No, because you,
and
because it
I
would be
know.
feedback. Oh, yeah, you
I
can.
know, Beth.
That's
Yeah,
really
it doesn't do
strange. So
feedback.
there's something not connected
Yeah,
in the proper way. Chris,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to send in a message, again, I will read it. That's the best I've got, unfortunately.
Mm.
All right. No, it doesn't look like she's typing. Okay. All right, well, if it comes in, we'll back up. All right, Article 11, talks about the fifth modification of the River Bridge Development Agreement.
Yes, so this, when we went to close on the
Everyone on
property
YouTube
at River
can hear me.
Bridge, we knew there was a conservation restriction on the property. Unfortunately, we've run up against a rather onerous process known as Article 97, which if you'd like to fall asleep at night, go read Article 97 of the state
Everyone
code.
on YouTube
This is
can
a
hear me.
process whereby anytime you do a land transfer of a property that has a conservation restriction, it has to go through a very lengthy process, which requires town meeting approval, special state legislation, the state EEA approval. And the idea is to preserve conservation land. That once land is in conservation, you don't want land to be taken out of conservation. So, and unfortunately, when the town acquires a piece of property that has a CR or a conservation restriction on it, it extinguishes the CR. So welcome to fun Massachusetts state laws. Things that don't make sense, but unfortunately, that is the law. So what we have to do is transfer that conservation restriction to a third party, which we've spoken with the Conservation Commission about. That would be Sudbury Valley trustees. And that actual transfer of the CR is what triggers this whole lengthy Article 97 process that can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. So this is state bureaucracy and legislation, unfortunately, at its finest. And so as a result, something I certainly did not want to do, but we do have to extend the deadline for the purchase of the property in the River Bridge agreement, which requires us to do hopefully one last modification to the agreement. The other piece that town council discovered when working on the land purchase is that there are wells on the property the town was hoping to be able to assist adjacent property owners with. We've had several property owners come forward with interest in those wells, and being able to sell either the wells or the water rights is one way for us to recoup some funding. The way the CR was written, it was written so that the owner of the property was the only party that was allowed to use that water. So as part of all of this, we need to do a modification to the CR, which very thankfully, the Conservation Commission did vote unanimously to approve. So now we need town meeting approval as part of it. I know that's kind of a lot. That's sort of the Cliff Notes version of it, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them. Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel.
So we'll see you all back here in a year.
Yeah.
To talk about this again. But unfortunately, it's just a long,
Yeah.
it's a
on
long
this-
process.
Although this requires another vote and we weren't planning on another vote, everyone who's involved in this is working hard to go the direction. There's no change in intent by anybody. There's no new monies going anywhere. It is just taking much longer, and because of that, it requires a couple of votes.
And they've tightened Article 97 in the past couple of years, so that doesn't really help us either. That's really part of the reason why, you know, when this property was actually added to the third modification, the regulations for Article 97 were not as onerous as they are now. So there wouldn't have been as much of a concern to research that process at that time. But now it's changed.
And then,
Yeah, in keeping, just to
Okay,
go back,
do that.
so Chris had texted and said that everyone on YouTube can hear me, so I showed Scott and
right. And I
And then
related
next
it to the, and so apparently those of us in the room, the only people who can't hear Chris, people on YouTube can hear Chris, Roger can hear her in the room next door.
Sorry.
We just can't hear her in here to actually participate it. So
Thank you
we'll
for-
probably try to resolve that after the meeting.
We will, I will
but,
make sure to
All
our
right.
cable folks.
All right, and our last item, our last article, tonight that we'll talk about is to transfer funding from affordable housing donation accounts to municipal affordable housing trust.
Okay, so there are two accounts that we have right now where affordable housing funding is resting, if you will. So the first is money that came from penalties that developers paid the town for not developing affordable housing units as required under the town's zoning bylaws. And the second comes from the Highland Commons Development Agreement, which required them through the agreement to put a certain amount of funding aside for affordable housing. So now that the town has a municipal affordable housing trust that has all of the rights, privileges, and responsibilities to develop affordable housing, we can give the authority to them to oversee and expend these funds. It is just over $500,000, and hopefully we can do some good with it. So that is this article. I don't know if anyone has any questions. And this is just a transfer of funds at this time. There's not a specific property purchase right now. They have been looking at some properties. This would require additional town meeting votes in order to transfer town-owned properties to the housing trust. So that will likely be coming forward at a future town meeting.
Transfer town-owned property.
Right.
To the
Mhm.
trust. They are their own entity.
And those funds can't be used for other, I know you guys transfer funds all the time to make the town work. Those funds can't be transferred to any other entities, only for the housing trust.
So they have to be used for this specific purpose, and if this article passes at town meeting, they would fall under the jurisdiction of just the housing trust.
Okay.
Yes, because right now we don't really have a mechanism to use them. The planning board has used a little bit of the funds for our housing production plan, which is part of the town's master plan, as well as we have an affordable housing, we have a housing consultant through Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, but they're not the entity that would be working to develop the affordable housing. So this isn't a resource they can really use. Oh, okay.
Oh.
Third time's a charm?
There's a term?
I don't know, is it?
Nope.
Oh,
Third time is not a charm.
because we have to have that one muted.
Yes. Yeah, Brittany thought it was something to do, it's gotta be something to do with the speakers in the room.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you,
Well.
Dee.
Well, that concludes our
Yep.
discussion of the town warrant. Again, you'll be getting all these lovely pieces of information whizzing through your mailbox over the next couple days, and
I
the-
realized they actually went out yesterday.
Did they?
So,
So they'll show
yes.
up maybe tomorrow. So remember, December 9th, be there, Berlin Memorial School, 6:30 for us elder folks. Well, you know, hey, it's a Monday night.
But 6:30 is still after the sun has gone down.
That is correct. That is correct. Unfortunately, I stuck an earwig in Scott's head the other day when I started singing Hello Darkness, My Old
Yes,
Friend.
yep.
It's dark at 5 o'clock again, so I won't do that again for him. But are there any other, you know, you gotta have some levity at the table. Questions, comments?
We look up there, but if someone had asked, if
I
I don't know if we'd be
know,
able to hear them,
it's-
so.
Let's have it, just.
I
in
know,
front-
I
We
know.
can have someone translate. And what Scott and I are doing is just, we have to formally sign these so that they can go to constables.
I could have swore I've signed them
Lieu of
a
other
couple of times already.
people to be
We did,
distributed.
and you
So
voted to
wondering-
sign them. Remember the dollar amount
Yep.
went down on the last page, so we wanted to have an accurate.
Yes, Miss D?
Hey, maybe Chris can say goodbye to us.
Motion to adjourn.
Nope,
No, we still.
nope. All right.
Maybe Chris can hang around for a little bit after the meeting is done, but we thank everyone for coming.
Yes, our next select board
I-
meeting is the 2nd. There really wasn't a lot on the agenda for the 18th, so, but if you have something, email us and we'll have a chat.
Most informative.
All right.
Thanks.
TTFN.
Should do a motion to.
Oh, sorry.
So I motion that we adjourn.
And I second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are
Chris,
out.
are you in favor of adjourning even though we can't hear you?